Hey YouTube, back with another episode of Behind the Meta. So what I do in this series is look at Pokemon that they're placed in the meta over the years, why they were good and maybe not good now, or why they weren't good and they are good, or why they've been both. So I did Skarmory, I did Azumarill, and now I'm going to look at Hypno, because Hypno was a very, very interesting one. If you have played since the beginning of GBL, Hypno was a staple. It was one of the top 10 Pokemon, top 10 ranked Pokemon, and probably like top 5 usage Pokemon in the Great League when GBL was first starting out. And now it is nowhere, and like the title says, it will never come back. I truly think that there are some limitations with this Pokemon in the way that the PvP and GBL is set up now that will really, I don't think that Pokemon can come back from what it is, unfortunately. So let's go over some stats. Let's go over some movesets and reasons why it was super, super strong back in the day and why not so much now. So Hypno, as you can see right on the screen, I go over this every single time. Loving this stat product. Very defensive. And again, we know that defensive heavy Pokemon generally with over that 2000 stat product do strong in the Great League if they have good typings and good moves associated with that. There's three things: typings, moves, stat product. Hypno stat product, beautiful. 103.6 attack, really high defense, 140.8, and really high decent stamina, 148, 2161 overall. So this is what made Hypno so strong back in the day, right? Because you had, it only is level 25 to 29, but that's what everything was back in the day, right? You had a couple like Azumarill who got up to like level 38, which were very bulky, but the most of the Pokemon, Swamperts, Venusaurs, they were all in the level 22. So you have these non-defensive heavy Pokemon against a tank that was Hypno. So Hypno really dominated. And what made Hypno kind of interesting back in the day was just it was one of the few Pokemon that actually did fast move damage, right? There was really kind of two: Altaria with its Dragon Breath and Confusion Hypno that really did the fast move damage. A lot of the other Pokemon, Umbreon, Swampert, Venusaur, Machamp as a counter user, you can kind of argue, but they were not really fast move damage Pokemon. So basically it was just Altaria and Hypno that were the fast move damage Pokemon. So Confusion, it's a 4-turn move, which is very, very slow. Not a lot of energy per turn, only 3, but really, really heavy output damage, 4.8, right? So it was just a very, very heavy attack heavy Pokemon from its fast move. Where it got interesting and where it was okay back in the day was its charge moves, and it has an abundance of charge moves to choose from. Psyshock, Ice Punch, all the punches: Ice Punch, Thunder Punch, Fire Punch, Shadow Ball, Focus Blast. You put Return on it, and then you have a couple Psychic moves in Future Sight and Psychic. So you had a ton of options. Almost always you never used Future Sight or Psychic, because basically how you wanted to use Hypno was, if you're going to do the psychic damage, you don't need a super hard hitting charge move like Future Sight and Psychic for two reasons. One, Confusion is a very, very slow energy generating move, right? So to get to these 55 and 65 moves takes a while. The second thing is, if you're already doing super effective confusions on something, it's kind of redundant to do like a super effective Future Sight and Psychic. So basically you are trying to cover your weaknesses with your charge moves, stuff that Confusion would be resisted by, so like steals and stuff. So oftentimes you had a couple combos you can run. Some people just ran double punches, and this was always hit or miss what punch. Thunder Punch seemed like a must back in the day, just because there was a lot of flyers and it was a Azumarill everywhere, right? So everyone ran Thunder Punch. Some people for their second move went Fire Punch and Ice Punch. Others went Shadow Ball, and others went Focus Blast. So it really came down to how you want to use it. As you can see, Ice Punch, Thunder Punch, Fire Punch are coverage moves, and I'm going to go over the weaknesses in a second. Let's just continue with the strengths. Shadow Ball, as coverage moves, Shadow Ball and Focus Blast were pretty good. Again, Confusion is not a fast energy move, so it's a little slow to get to these moves, but you're so bulky, you can take a lot of fast move damage and charge move damage that you can often get to a Shadow Ball and Focus Blast with ease. So being able to put damage output on the confusions, and then having like a super hard either 100 damage Shadow Ball or 150 damage Focus Blast really made Hypno really strong. And then, yeah, so that was all its strengths. Now let's go into the two sort of weaknesses, and then we're going to go, and I'll give you my rationale why it no longer has play in this meta, and it won't have play moving forward with the current movesets and the problem with its typing. So, the punches. Everyone knows that these punches need to be buffed. 40 for 55 damage across the board is terrible. You don't get any same type attack bonus on these. So these are just the base stats. 40 energy, 55, 1.38. They're bait moves, but they're bad bait moves, right? 1.38 damage is terrible, especially on a low attack Pokemon. So these moves don't do much at all. They're not threatening. A lot of Pokemon have these moves. Like if we just put in Ice Punch, I think we need to add Ice Punch in here. A lot of Pokemon have these moves. So a lot of Pokemon would benefit from it, like down in here, like Hitmonchan with the punches, Dusclops, Hypno, Haunter, Primeape, even Sandslash give it a little bit of boost. The problem is Medi. You can't really buff Ice Punch because Medi would be even more dominant than it was, right? Medi was the number one rank for like 5 or 6 seasons before the meta change, and you couldn't buff Ice Punch because it has a direct effect on that as well, right? And so again, Hypno has access to Thunder Punches, and they're all even, right? So if you look at the things with Thunder Punch, if you look at all the Pokemon with the punches, no one uses them because they're so bad. So really, these punches do need a buff, but Niantic won't do it because it makes Medi even more dominant than it was. So unfortunately, when you have a slow charging move and your only bait move is a terrible non-stab 1.38 damage, with 40 energy is not, it's low, like 35 is like one of the lowest ones with Body Slam, but like, so 40 is pretty quick, but that damage output is not cutting it, especially on the Pokemon. So for that reason, yes, you have decent secondary, your second move is good. Shadow Ball or Focus Blast, you can go either or. Having your punch as your first bait move that just doesn't threaten really off the bat limits you. The second thing is your typing. Pure Psychic. A lot of the Pokemon you see, there's only a couple Pure Psychics in this meta, and they get by because of their charge moves or their other moves. So like in terms of pure, let's just look this up. So in terms of Pure Psychic, 2 off the top of my head, Cresselia and Defense Deoxys. So Glade has that fighting secondary typing. Medi has that fighting secondary typing. People don't really use Wobbuffet, and then we're down to Mew, and then people don't use Mew because there's no reason to use Mew if you have Sableye, because Sableye is just better. So the only 2 Pokemon really that are pure psychics are Defense Deoxys and Cresselia, and Cresselia gets by because Psycho Cut is such a fast charging move. You can hit really hard with the Future Sight or even the Moonblast, and then a nice, again, Grass Knot. If you want to talk, it's not a bait move per se. It's 50, so it's way more than the 40, but 1.8 damage, right? So doing quick Psycho Cuts to get to a 1.8 damage, 50 energy move, as opposed to doing slow damage to get to like a 1.38 Thunder Punch, right? It just, the trade-off isn't there. Same with Defense Deoxys. Psycho Boost is actually a great first move. 35 energy, 80, again, yes, it lowers your attack times too, but 35 energy, 84 damage, 2.4 damage per energy, right? Love it. And then even at 45, we're at 1.67. So the move sets and then counter, right? Counter is one of the best fast moves in the game. So from a pure psychic standpoint, Hypno suffers from when it comes down to your weaknesses and your resistances. And it's a little both actually, because let's just start with the weaknesses. Bug, Dark, and Ghost. Yes, there's some bug, not a ton of bug. You'll get it on your Galvantulas, and your Charge-a-Bugs are out there with X Scissors and stuff, and Lunge. So yeah, there's a couple bugs. That's not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is Dark and Ghost, and there is a lot of Dark and Ghost. And even some of these fighters now, like Annihilate, is also half Ghost. So even the fighters that you should dominate can now hit super effective against you. So a lot of dark, a lot of ghost is kind of a problem for psychic Pokemon. The problem is the resistances. You only have 2. So, and one of them is psychic, which again, there's like very, very, very few psychic moves. So the psychic resistance is almost kind of useless. Fighting resistance is nice. There is an abundance of fighter in both Great League and Ultra League. But your fighting, your fighting is essentially your only resistance you get. So you have the resistance of fighting, which is nice. You don't have much else. You got terrible Thunder Punch movesets. And now what happens? So in the early meta, it was pretty good because you had just a bunch of these Pokemon that could not get to high. Like Azumarill was the bulkiest at like level 38, but then you have like, again, Skarmory, Swamperts, Venusaurs, Machamps, that would all get to like, I'm sure I'm missing some. Again, I wish I can remember like the earliest, like I wish I can compile a list because I'm sure I'm missing a couple, but for the most part, this is it. And you had like a decent average 6 and 4. The problem with this, and you're going to see this going into the meta now, is what has changed. So I say Umbreon and Sableye, they were around. Like I showed you in my other video that I have a level 40 Sableye, because yes, that's what you had to do. You had to use a level 40 Sableye, so it's very, very underpowered. Registeel, I have Zap Cannon on Registeel. We did not have Zap Cannon back in the day. We only had Flash Cannon. I don't know if that changes anything because it's not going to change anything because Confusion is resisted. But you won some, like you dominated the fighters and just a lot of stuff just based on your bulk. You were one of the OG safe swaps. And then what happened? What happened is, like I going over all these things, the XLs happened. There's actually 2 things that really hurt Hypno. The first is Hypno got by because it was very, very bulky with good fast move damage in a meta that was not very bulky. So the first thing is you have a bunch of Pokemon with the same bulk as Hypno, right? I've already gone over them in the past. Lantern, Medis, all that stuff. Lickitungs not only probably have the same stats, defensive stats and stamina stats, probably have better those stats. So you already have a bunch of Pokemon that have better stat products in there with a better moveset and better fast moves and better charge moves. So right off the bat, you have Pokemon with that you got same stat products with better typings and better moves. So you would 100% use those over Hypno. That's the first thing. The second thing is that changed is actually the meta. And I just ran it against what the current meta is. I guess I should max my stat product just to make this fair. Your record, it's funny because when you look at your record, you're like 22 and 19. Isn't that an improvement? Yes, but you do need to consider the actual matchups, win-losses here. And so like when you look at some of the wins, it's against some, I don't want to say these Pokemon aren't as in the open anymore because they're definitely like Poliwrath is 100% in the open. But outside of just like the fighters that in the open, like you're gonna beat fighters. You're gonna beat Poliwrath. You're gonna beat Medi. You're gonna beat Annihilate, even though it has Shadow Ball, right? You're just gonna out confusion them in the one shield. You can easily confusion down a fighter in the one shield. It's almost anything else. One is it's bait dependent. So like this Charge-a-Bug, I've got to imagine that you need to bait a Thunder Punch. So you're throwing a Thunder Punch and landing a Shadow Ball. If you just go straight Shadow Ball, I imagine you're going to get outpaced to the X Scissor. And that's exactly what happens, right? If you go for the Nuke on Shadow Ball right away, you lose the Charge-a-Bug matchup. And it's going to be that situation a lot because your bait move sucks. It's not going to really do any damage on these Pokemon that are all very, very bulky now. And your charge move takes too long to get to with confusion. So if you don't get it off and land it, it really limits you. Plus, there's a lot more stuff that resists you now, like Guzzlord, Mandibuzz, Scrafty. Everyone has Sableye now. More Steels and Sandslash, Galarian Sunfrets. Like these are Pokemon that were not around. Like more Ghost, Trevenant. Umbreon was still around. Like there's more counters to you and more things that resist your confusion. And that's why you got by on confusion back in the day, because not a lot of things resisted confusion. Now, a lot more things resist confusion. Now, a lot more things hit super effective against you. Everyone has a lot more ghost types than there really weren't any ghost types back in the day. Sableye was like one of the first ghost types that you used. Shadow Marowak with Shadow Ball, Shadow Bone. Yeah, Shadow Ball back in the day before it got Shadow Bone. That was how Hypno got by in the past, but it not with the current state of the meta. So I say in the title, even though the record is, again, decent, it is decent. 22-19 average. Again, the average is below 500 with ease, and you just get too old. And I think my conclusion on this Pokemon is 234 in the Great League. I don't see how it gets out of that range, quite honestly, because it's not even that the confusion is bad. You can live with a hard hitting, not fast charging move like confusion when you still have bulk. Even though there's a bunch of XL Pokemon, you still have bulk relative to the average Pokemon in Great League. So you can get by with a hard hitting fast move with not a lot of charge energy. The problem is there's two things. There's two big issues. The punches. So unless something changes with your bait move, you're just not going to do anything. But then the second thing is, which you can't really change, is your typing and your, like, I guess the fast move here, unless you get access to some other fast move that can maybe get you like Shadow Ball and Focus Blast fast, maybe it'll be more interesting. But just the amount of counters to Hypno now in the open meta, and the amount of things that resist confusion and can just, like, not only resist confusion, a lot of the stuff that, like, you can get by back in the day going, because that's the thing. Back in the day, you could go Confuse and Thunder Punch and be fine because everything was glassy. Now, Confusion and Thunder Punch is not going to cut it against the majority of these Pokemon. So it really limits the damage that this Pokemon can do against, like, the average bulkier Great League Pokemon. So based on these movesets, based on its typing, based on the current state of the meta, I really do not see a path back for Hypno in the Open Great League right now. And you got to remember, there were two sort of there's more than two OG teams. Like, one of the OG teams was Skarmory. Like, I think the oldest OG team, which I talked about in the Skarmory, was Skarmory Swampert Core. That was OG. Everyone knows about Grasshole, Bastiodon, Shadowvic, and a second Razor Leafer. Hypno Double Dark, the old Vergiverg special. Hypno Double Dark was one of the sort of OG lines. So Hypno lead, you use probably like Umbreon to draw out a fighter. Umbreon's bulky enough. You come in and Confusion down the fighter, and then your, like, Scrafty or something would roam free in the back. Like, when it's one of the oldest teams. Now, that doesn't work as much anymore because you have fighters, like, sort of like, again, I know Nileap's half ghost, so it would have problems against a dark, but, like, you have fighters that are like Medi, half psychic themselves, so they would actually take neutral to it. I know they'd still get killed, but, like, take neutral to that. You have Scrafty, which actually just neutralizes, actually resists, because dark double resists psychic, so would single resist your confusions, and Scrafty would just take that whole team now, right? You save swap Umbreon, Scrafty is going to ramp up with counter, and then you're going to have either ramped up Scrafty in mirror match, or you're going to have Scrafty just kill Hypno. A lot more people have access to that now. And then a lot of these other Pokemon, the thing was, like, back in the day when you had, like, Machamp, so like non-stab Rock Slide, like, some of these are going to throw, again, there's a lot of non-stab, but if you get a Nileap, if a Nileap, like, ramps up on something, it can throw a super effective Shadow Ball. It's just, the meta has changed too much to allow Hypno to have play there, which is, it's just interesting because, like, again, it was a staple for those of us who played in the early days. At least, I was going to say 4 to 5 seasons, but it's probably like 5 to 7 seasons. It was a staple in Great League. And then XL's got introduced, and new meta Pokemon, like Trevenants and everything, started showing up everywhere. And when Trevenant showed up everywhere, there's no place for a pure psychic in the meta doing just psychic moves. And then again, Registeel started showing up everywhere. Galarian Stunfisk started showing up everywhere. Darks, Scrafty, and Umbreon started showing up everywhere. Sableye on every single team pretty much. So you can't when your fast move is a slow, hard hitting but slow psychic move that can just be resisted by these things. Your opponent's Pokemon is just going to farm up, take you out with ease, and come out with a ton of energy, and it's just a losing condition. So Hypno has not been relevant for, like I said, probably like 8 or 9 seasons now, and based on everything that I showed you in this video, I don't think it will ever come back. But yeah, that's it. I'm gonna try. I've got it set up. It's already 10:30 tonight, so I'm shooting this at 10:30 for tomorrow morning. So I will not be able to shoot my Jungle Cup tomorrow afternoon, but I'll figure it out before tomorrow afternoon. But yeah, I like doing these series, and everyone seems to be enjoying these. It's fun to look back at the history. It's fun to actually understand the pros and cons. I guess I should. One thing I did actually do with other ones is if you're going to use Hypno. I don't know why you would use Hypno, because I just spent 20 minutes talking about why don't use it. If you're going to use it. I guess, yeah, bulky. So I guess let's look at 2 things that I did in the other videos that I should do here. Bulky, already talked about its bulk. Fast move pressure, already talked about the confusion. Low shield pressure. Low shield pressure may struggle to draw shields because of its weaker or slower attacks. Again, slower charging, confusion. You're very, very rarely going to get to the Shadow Ball and Focus Blast, and then your Thunder Punch sucks. So you're not going to grab shields, and clumsy. Long animations, it's stuck to you. Yeah, it's long animations. Confusion's a four turn move. If you're going to team build with this, it's going to say do a fighter or a water. No, Poliwrath I'd say is more fighter, right? Annihilate, Medi, Poliwrath. Makes sense, right? Dark's going to resist you. Steel's going to resist you. Use a fighter to deal with that. It's a very easy pairing. Yeah, I don't know if I'd use Annihilate, because that would make you... I guess Annihilate isn't weak to fighting. I take that back. I said that earlier. Someone's probably already commented on that. Annihilate isn't weak to fighting because it's half fighting. Annihilate isn't weak to Dark because it is half fighting, half ghost. That said, Hypno and Annihilate would both be weak to Ghost. Same with Medi. So maybe something like Poliwrath probably would be the better pairing for Hypno. So that's it. Yeah, I'm enjoying the series. It's fun to look back, and some people are just like, oh, they are liking the series because it's giving them an actual in-depth analysis of Pokemon to see like why they are the way they are. Because again, a bunch of content creators just put this out like, yeah, this Pokemon's good, but like, why? This is the why. This is the why it's good and not good. So yeah, comment below. I'll probably keep these going because there's a lot of Pokemon to go over the history of. There's like a couple hundred Pokemon. I could do this. I could do a couple hundred episodes of this. So I may do it because it's actually fun content that's not just rehashed teams. So I'm going to keep this going. Let me know in the comments below what Pokemon you want to see next. And yeah, stay tuned this afternoon. I do have a double Ghost Jungle Cup team. So stay tuned for that. And then we'll do another one of these tomorrow morning. I'll probably do it just based on what I see in the comments people want to see. So let me know in the comments below. Anyways, that's it. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next one.